Hey everybody, Charles here. In today's video, we're going to get you some completely unfiltered MBA admissions advice from one of our very, very favorite admissions consultants. And that is the thing we love to do in our MBA admissions content, in our GMAT and GRE content as well. Give you the unfiltered truth, no BS, no silly internet rumors. Here's how to actually improve. We're going to say the quiet part out loud. Now, with all that in mind, if you could use one-on-one help with your applications, please hit us up at gmatninja.com, fill out the contact form there, also available in the video description, and we will send you the names of a bunch of our favorite admissions consultants at a bunch of different companies, not just ours. And the reason we love to do that, if you've put in the hard work to kick butt on the GMAT, on the GRE, and the executive assessment, we want to make sure you end up in the best possible hands. There are a lot of mediocre consultants out there, a lot of great ones. We want to make sure you end up with one of the great ones. So hit us up via that contact form, video description, or at gmatninja.com. That's it. Enjoy today's video.
Hey everybody, Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Today we're going to talk about resumes. I'm going to show you some really bad resumes that people actually send in for their MBA applications. As usual for the conversation, Jennifer Jackson, Senior Admissions Counselor at Stratus Admissions, HBS grad, Northwestern School of Journalism grad, former PR person, seen a lot of resumes, knows what to do, knows what not to do. Jennifer, thanks so much for doing this.
So glad to be here. I'm excited to look at some of these resumes with you.
So before we show all of our heinous resumes to everybody, why is, this is going to sound like a really dumb question, but why is this so important? I feel like resumes are sometimes a little bit of an afterthought for MBA applications. Say a little bit about kind of how these are used and where they fit in the admissions process.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is a little bit of an afterthought. People concentrate on the essays, and the resume is actually most likely the very first thing that admissions committees are going to look at, and they're going to look at it in about a minute. And so there are a lot of best practices that people can learn to just maximize that real estate and do it in the right way. And don't do this right before the deadline. Start working on it way ahead.
And would you say that the resume for an MBA application is different from the resume that you would send for a job application? Or are they pretty much the same thing?
It's definitely different. There are a lot of things that are going to be the same, like how you might structure bullet points and things like that. I think difference in formatting and different things you may or may not include. So most likely everyone listening is going to have to redo their resume from their last job search.
Awesome. Homework, everybody. Here it comes. All right. We're going to show you some bad resumes. What we originally really wanted to do was show you actual resumes from actual applicants. And then we realized as we were doing that it wasn't going to be very nice. We didn't want anybody to be watching a video and go, hey, you're calling my resume terrible. So we took some liberties. We took ideas from resumes that we'd seen and kind of turn it into something. You might recognize this guy, but if we're going to throw somebody under the bus, it might as well be me. Jennifer, what do you think of this? Just from a format perspective, obviously no content in this, but I see a lot of this sort of thing, multiple colors, couple of columns, pictures. It seems really common now. What do you think of that? Is that something that's okay? Good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea. This is not great. So we don't want colors. We don't want any fancy graphics. Definitely don't want pictures. And it reminds me of a client I had years ago who was able to get feedback from an admissions officer after he was not admitted somewhere before he was working with us. And the person, and his resume was dreadful. It had a pie chart and timelines and things, every color in the rainbow. And the person said, we're looking for unique candidates, not unique resumes. So you're going to stand out by your content, not by how you're going to make your resume look. So this one has a lot of work to do.
Okay, so now we have the opposite of that, right? Here's your very basic, nice default font, nice and kind of staid, no pretty colors. What's your reaction to this, the way it's laid out?
This one is just way too dense. Everything's crammed in. It's hard to read for everybody. And if it's hard to read, they're just not going to spend much time on it. And it's not going to be good for you because you might have some great things you're trying to convey that are not going to be really paid any attention to. So, and I can't see it super well, but I can see there are only years on it. So you're going to want to share much more detail when you're sharing dates about the different things that you've done. So you're going to want to have the months along with the years and just not have it so crammed in. We need more white space, and we'll talk later about maybe different headings.
And Jennifer, fair to say that, I mean, so obviously people just try to get more in there, which isn't a great strategy because the important things are going to get lost. Is it fair to say that people are skimming the resumes? Like, is that a fair term? And what you want, at least for somebody's first 20 or 30 seconds or whatever it is, they're going to skim through for kind of the broad trajectory, the big highlights. And so you want to make it skimmable, partly by providing that white space. Is that fair to say, or are we being unfair to readers by accusing them of skimming this stuff?
I think at the first look, it is almost a skim. I mean, how much can you read every detail in a minute? And so the right side of the resume, those dates are really important. And so they're going to look from bottom to top, really, to make sure that all of the months and years since you graduated are accounted for. Because if they're not, you're going to need to explain that in an optional essay because you'll have an employment gap. So there is some skimming going on, and you want to make it as easily readable as possible, like for the dates. And then they can spend maybe a little bit more time seeing what you actually did and what results you got.
So we'll get into the weeds toward the end of the video on how to make some of these bullets shorter. So I was trying, in fabricating this resume, I was trying to commit every crime I could think of. Some of these bullets are super long. Obviously, this isn't a variation of Lorem Ipsum. It's not real language. Bullets are really long. That's one thing we'll talk later about how to condense those down so that you kind of get more bang for your buck in terms of the real estate. Okay, one thing we've got at the beginning of this one, we've got a summary. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. And again, not a real summary. I borrowed this from applications that we've seen come in, changed some things, so I'm throwing myself under the bus. What's your reaction to this kind of thing? Is it worth putting on resumes in general, and in particular for MBA resumes? Do you like this?
I don't think it's worth putting them on in general. There might be some jobs for some reason that it's necessary. I haven't seen it, but certainly for MBA applications, definitely not necessary. It's just a waste of very important real estate. So all of you are going to be applying for an MBA, and a lot of these summaries are kind of used for talking about what you might be looking for and why you're good for that kind of role. And you're applying for the same role, which is MBA student. So ditch the summary.
And in general, I find that when I read these, it's usually saying things that the reader already knows elsewhere. It's kind of redundant with the rest of the resume, a cover letter. In the case of an MBA application, you've got plenty of real estate to say all of this stuff. And I find that these are usually nothing burger. Okay, what about overall structure here? So let's get rid of the summary. Obviously, still horrible fonts here and all that. But most of the time, this is what I see on resumes coming in from applicants: education, professional experience, something like skills and interests. Is that the right structure? Do you like to see something different for MBA applications?
This is not the right structure. So for MBA applications, we want your professional experience first. You're not coming straight from college. It might be okay to have it first if you're a deferred enrollment applicant, but otherwise have your work experience at the top and then have education, but you want much less of your resume. I can't read it, but there's a lot there. We don't need so much, definitely where you went, of course, the dates, your major, your GPA, potentially. You don't even need to have all your activities because there will be places elsewhere in the application to share those. And I think we'll talk about skills and interests in a little bit, but what this is missing, a big thing that this is missing that a lot of people don't have for just kind of work searching resumes is a heading on leadership and community engagement. So that's one of the big buckets that admissions is going to evaluate you on. What does your leadership look like outside of work? What are you involved in? It can be from college and it can be after college, but there should be a heading there where you're discussing that in a robust way with associated dates too.
Okay, so ideal world, you'd like to see 4 sections on an MBA resume. So professional experience at the top, again, unless maybe you're a deferred applicant. The community leadership and engagement, education, and then some sort of skills and interests. So 4 sections typically.
Typically, yes. There are exceptions where somebody might be an entrepreneur and they really want to call out entrepreneurial experience that might be separate from their day job and maybe even separate from leadership. But typically, yes, those are the right ones.
And okay, last piece, that skills and interest part. And again, we made this up. What do you think of this? Is this a good section to put in there? What should you put in there if you're going to include one? What do you think of these specific details?
So it's great to include skills and interests. We only recommend including skills if you have skills that I would say many other people don't have. So Microsoft Office, take that out. Anybody really has that. Google Docs, no. But, Python and the others, keep things like that in there because not a lot of people don't have those skills. As far as languages, I wouldn't just put English if you're a native English speaker and it's obvious from your resume, but you have no other language. They will assume that. If you have another language, then you can put the 2 that you're fluent in. And then as far as interests, this is what I think a lot of people overlook. So if you have skills and interests, you might have a skills line and then an interest line. And people say, this is very common what you have here. People put travel, fitness, sports. And we think the interest line should be a lot more interesting. So it's one of the places you can kind of add color to you as a person. And so you could have, instead of travel, say where you've loved to travel. Instead of cuisine, is it eating out at restaurants? Is it cooking different cuisine? What kind of cuisine? So just drilling down a little bit more and making it a little more specific really can make a difference, even if you have fewer of them as a result. So they learn more about you. And then also your resume is going to be looked at by your interviewer, hopefully down the line. And sometimes it's kind of a good conversation topic. You know, if someone puts, I'm a huge Washington Commanders fan, that might be something that people ask about.
One of my
Just
favorites.
For example.
Very briefly, one of my favorites, I had a student years and years ago who was from a Muslim country, was a practicing Muslim, but happened to have a phenomenal taste for wine and was a very accomplished sommelier, put that on his skills and interests. The person at HBS that did his interview deliberately chose him off the pile because this guy had sommelier training and owned a bunch of wine bars and said, I'm talking to this guy. They talked about wine for 45 minutes and that was it. And
that's a perfect example. It just shares a little bit more about you on a sheet of paper where there's very little about you just as a person and what you do in your free time. So don't overlook it and do that at the last second.
All right. Okay. So that's enough of the bad resumes. Next chunk here. The actual writing bit, when we get into those bullet points on your resume, it's really easy to craft those in not so great ways. What we saw in those bad resumes was really, really long things. So let's take a look at a couple kind of before and after bullets that you've had from your clients. And give me just a minute to get this on screen. There we go. So we'll just go through two of these. So Jennifer, tell us a little bit about this first one and kind of tell us a little bit about the applicant and kind of what went badly the first time and what was much better in the second version.
So this was actually a client in more of an untraditional role. So she worked in municipal government in New York City, and she was trying to do way too much in the first one here. And so it is important to be as quantifiable as you can with your results. Some roles are going to lend themselves, of course, so much more easily to doing that than others. And her role, not so much. So she just tried to kind of throw in a lot of numbers, but it's very muddled. It's way too long. We recommend 2-line bullets on your resume. So we shortened it up, chose one of the numbers that she had just to kind of show the scale of the initiative, and otherwise just kind of cut out a lot of the detail. And, you know, it might be something she could talk more about, kind of the hows and whys in an essay and things like that. But as far as the resume, you just don't have the real estate to have that kind of, they're just not going to read something that long.
And I think there's the temptation to over quantify that I think is, tell me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, I'm guessing is part of what you reacted to in this one, where there's 4 numbers in the original version, 62,000 survey responses, 250 ideas, 220 conversations. And it sounds great. Look at all this stuff. If I'm glancing at that, I can't process it. I don't know what's important. And I look at the second one, I see one number.
And so having all of them makes each one sort of less impactful. And so just simplifying it was really important for her, I think.
All right, one more of these. So tell us a little bit about this fellow.
So this was a consultant, and again, was trying to do way too much with this first bullet here. We don't need all that kind of detail to see what he did. So we start with a strong action verb. And while we're talking about verbs and how to begin a bullet, a lot of people wonder about tense, and they think if they're still doing something and if it's an ongoing project that it should have a different tense, like present tense. I would recommend all your verbs, just for consistency, be in the same tense, and the past tense is just, I think, the clearest. So define sales and onboarding strategy. We just distilled it to a lot shorter and then finished with that punchy, good, quantifiable result that he was able to get. And that's just a great way to end it, you know, accelerating the bank's time to revenue by 50%. And so look at the difference in what you're getting from what he did from the before and after. Like, it's just much more clear and easy to read.
All right. Okay, so just to wrap up, I guess for anybody who's looking at this and going, oh, wow, I'm doing lots of these crappy things that these two just put on the screen, and now I'm overwhelmed, and how do I create a good resume? I guess any advice for somebody who's maybe just starting out, they realize they need an overhaul. how do you start an overhaul? What does that look like for somebody?
Well, you find a template like we're talking about with these certain headings. And you, first of all, you also spend a lot more time on it than maybe an hour toward the end of the application process. So, and then you're kind of thinking about the different roles you've had and what were the most important things that you did in these roles, especially ones that you can quantify in some sort of simple way. And you also want to think about sharing different aspects of your role. So if certain things are collaborating with a cross-functional team, that might show your interpersonal skills, where other ones are more analytical and data-driven. If you can have a mix of that, that's fantastic. And just if you're kind of paying attention to these headings and listening to some of what we talked about as far as best practices, I think you'll be in pretty good shape.
Awesome. Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this. For everybody watching, if you enjoyed this video, obviously, please hit the like button, please subscribe. Just importantly with this video, we were trying to cover enough points to help you with your resume in about 15 minutes. If you want to see more, you have more resume questions, please hit us up in the comments. If there's enough things people are asking about, we'll drag Jennifer back on and do all this again. So thanks again, Jennifer.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching, everybody.